It's a very special place. It's not just the house, which is beautifully built, so well designed. It's the history of the people that have lived here. I think James and Mary Harper. James was the son of convicts, and Mary was a convict. James's parents were both convicts. We know his father stole 2 horses outside London. So he came out around 1800. We don't know what James's mother did. She came from Dublin. We know that James was brought up in Parramatta and went to school in Parramatta. We know he spent his youth, his teenage years, moving cattle around for the various landowners. But we sometimes refer to him as a likely lad. He was a little bit free with the truth. Well, you could put it that way. Or alternatively, he knew how to use the system. He did get land grants. He did get help. And so that by the time he actually came to build Harper's Mansion, he'd already got cattle. He'd got about 20, 30 cattle. And he was earning a good wage as a constable. And he was probably making friends with the right sort of people. We know more about Mary. She worked in a metal factory in the middle of Birmingham. She worked as a silver polisher. And so we surmise that she stole a piece. We don't know, because this all happened in the Midlands of England and all the records disappeared. But for that theft, she was 26. She'd no record, but she was sentenced to death. But the judges had some discretion, depending on the value of the theft. If it was under a certain amount, then the judge could use his discretion to commute the death sentence to transportation. And that's what Mary got. She got transportation for 14 years. They also owned the Surveyor General Inn down in Berrima. And an inn in those days was what I would call a Westfield supermarket. It had accommodation, drink, stables, blacksmiths, wheelwrights, and everybody had to stay there because it was a long way and a long time to get to Sydney. So they were making a lot of money. You have to imagine a very different Berrima from today. It was, even on a fast horse, it would have taken you more than 1 a day to get to Sydney. And to do that, you've got to go through lots of bush, which is quite dangerous. So it's a very remote place, and based on self-sufficiency, they would have had to have grown all their own food, and they would have to have grown a lot, because if they were trying to supply their visitors down at the inn, they would have needed a lot of food. They would have had to have cattle, sheep, goats, and look after all that, as well as looking after the visitors at the inn. So yes, a very hard life. She gave birth to 6 children. 1 was stillborn, and of those 6, 3 of them became adults. The other 3 died. The first one, very tragically, at about, I think he was only about 2.5 years old, he walked into a fire. You know, they had those great big open fires, and I guess mother turned her back and in he went, and he probably died of his burns. He's buried in Sutton Forest churchyard. The other 2 died when they were 6 or 7 years old, probably of something like smallpox or measles, which were very prevalent. And there was no doctor here, so any remedy, if there was such, would really not have been available to her. So a very hard life for a woman in a place like this. I think they were really quite wealthy, but James, unfortunately, hit the bottle. It was the publican's curse, and at the tender age of 39, he dropped dead. This house is so genuine and really represent the 1830s. It's even more special because of its locality in Berrima for this period. It's really very early for the style of house in what was then a frontier town. It's 3 bricks thick on the outside, which is quite unusual, and all the internal walls are 2 bricks thick. Even if you took the roof off, the house would stand up of its own accord. The cedar was brought up from the Shoalhaven and handcrafted. New South Wales didn't make glass until the 1850s. So all the glass would have come by sea and in these little small panes, and would have had to come via bullock cart from Sydney. So really very precious. And the fact we've got about 6 of those old panes of glass left, I think is fantastic. They would probably have gone upstairs to sleep, and we assume they used these 2 downstairs rooms, which are really the height of fashion. They're beautiful, well-proportioned Georgian rooms, and they would probably have been kept for best. There was no water in this house. The kitchen was outside, there was a well, there was no electricity, they had to use candles. There was heating, every room's got a fireplace, so they were warm, but no water, no electricity. The toilet is a moot point. It was outside, certainly, and it was probably a drop. In other words, you had a board with a hole in it and you sat on it. Very cold here in winter. So there were always chamber pots underneath the beds, which you used. And when I first started as a guide, I used to talk about Mary Harper coming down the stairs in her long skirts, carrying this chamber pot, and how difficult that would be because the stairs are very steep. And then I thought, don't be stupid. She would have opened a window and chucked it out. It really does not take a great deal of imagination to imagine James and Mary in the 1830s making this fantastic life for themselves. That's what makes this house special. It's an 1830s house, virtually unaltered.